Hey guys, in this video I'm going to go over the Unit 4 review, and this video is going to cover questions 1 through 16. Okay, so in the first two problems you want to write the equation of a line parallel to the given graph or equation that contains the point -2, 1. So before I even start, let's talk about parallel lines and perpendicular lines. Okay, if I want two lines to be parallel to each other, I want their slopes to be exactly the same. If I want two lines to be perpendicular, they need to have opposite reciprocal slopes. So all I need is a point and a slope, and then I can start, okay? So I know that I have to use the point -2, 1. I have to use that point because the new line must go through that point. Okay, well, what I need for my information is I need a slope to use. So I need to figure out the slope. Well, I can find the slope from a line on a table or a line on a graph. So you would start, we're going to do rise over run. Right, that's how you find slope. Well, I'm going to start here. Again, it doesn't matter where you start. So if I rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's up 5. So +5 is my rise. What's my run? Well, if I run, I'm going to go to the left. So that's -1. So that means my slope is -5 because 5 divided by -1 is -5. Okay, the next thing we need to do is determine, do we use the same slope or do we change it? Well, we want to create a parallel line. If I'm trying to create a parallel line, then I want the same slope. So in the new line, I want to use this slope also. Okay, so I have that slope. Now I need to use the point that I'm given. Well, this is the point that I have to use. So my point is -2, 1. Okay, so we have a point, and then we have the slope we need to use. So let's go ahead and use point slope form because we're given a point and a slope. Point slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I'm going to plug in my information. Y, and then -1 is going to be -1 is going to be my y1. So -1. Remember, it's opposite signs. Equals my slope. My slope is -5 times x, and then my x1 is going to be -2, but when I plug it in, it's going to be +2. Okay, just like that. So I'm using point slope form. Now I want this in slope intercept form. I know it didn't state that, but that's the form that we want to go to. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute y minus 1 equals -5x minus 10, because -5 times 2 is -10. And then I want to get y by itself to get this into y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. We have y equals -5x minus 9. Okay, what is this equation and where does it come from? All right, we were creating a parallel line, right? So this is a line that I already have. That blue line is already on there. I need to create a new line that goes through this point, -2, 1. So that's like right here, okay? I want to create a new line. So basically that's what I did. I used the slope of my old line so that I could create a new line that is parallel to that blue one, okay? Moving on to number 2. Y equals 1/2 x plus 4. Okay, I want to create a line parallel to this one. So in order to create a parallel line, I need to first identify the slope. Now I only know the slope if it's in slope intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So I know the slope here because it's already in y equals mx plus b form. My slope here is 1/2. Okay, the point we want to use is -2, 1. I have a point, I have a slope, I'm going to use point slope form. So this is going to be y, remember this is x1, y1, y minus 1 equals 1/2 x plus 2. But we want it in slope intercept form, so we're going to distribute y minus 1 equals 1/2 x, 1/2 times +2 is +1, and then I want to get y by itself, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Y equals 1/2 x plus 2. Okay, this is the equation of my new line. Is it the same as my old line? No, and it shouldn't be the same because it's not supposed to be the exact same line. All I need from that old line is the same slope. Why do I need the same slope? Because I want a line that's parallel, okay? Moving on. Number 3 and 4, we want to write the equation of a line perpendicular to the given graph or equation that contains the point 4, 3. Okay, so in number 3, I have y equals 8x minus 1. Do I know the slope of this line? Yes, because y is already by itself. It's y equals mx plus b. So the slope here is going to be positive 8. Is this the slope that I want to use? No, because I want to create a perpendicular line. If I'm creating a perpendicular, if I'm trying to create a perpendicular line, I need opposite reciprocal slopes. That means I need to flip my fraction and then change the sign. So that means I'm not even going to use the slope of 8. My new slope is going to be negative because it's the opposite sign, and then I take 8 and I flip it. So it's going to be negative 1 over 8. That's the slope I want to use, not the old one, because I'm creating a perpendicular. If I use the old one, I'm creating a parallel line, and I don't want to do that. So please make sure you are reading. And then we want to make sure that it goes through the point 4, 3. From this point, then you can start, and you start in point slope form. Y minus 3 equals negative 1 over 8, x minus 4. Again, we don't want to use the same slope of 8, because if we do that, it'll be parallel. All right, so now we're going to distribute. So we have y minus 3 equals negative 1/8 times x is negative 1/8 x. Negative 1/8 times negative 4 is positive 1 over 2. Okay, so if I multiply those together, I get positive 1 over 2. Want to get y by itself, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Y equals negative 1/8 x plus 7 over 2. Is y by itself? Yes. So what did I just do here? I created two lines that are perpendicular to each other. Y equals 8x minus 1 is perpendicular to y equals negative 1/8 x plus 7 over 2. All right, moving on to number 4. This doesn't give me an equation, but all I really need is the slope, right? I want to know what the slope is. So let's go ahead and just pick a point. Doesn't matter, so I'm going to pick this one here. I'm going to do rise over run to find our slope. So if I rise to the next point, that's going to be up 2, so plus 2, over my run, which is going to be to the left 3, so that's minus 3. So my slope is negative 2 over 3. Is this the slope I want to use for my new equation? No. If I use this slope, it will be a parallel line. I don't want to use this slope. I want to use a different slope, the opposite reciprocal. So I need a new slope. Okay, well, opposite means opposite sign. So because I have a negative 2/3, it's now going to be positive, and then I flip the fraction. So positive 3 over 2. I don't want to use the old slope because I want perpendicular. I have the slope, I have the point I need to use, so we're going to do that. Y minus 3 equals 3 over 2, x minus 4. So I'm using the point, this is the point I want to use, 4, 3, and then I use my new slope because I'm creating a perpendicular line, not parallel. Y minus 3 equals 3 halves x. 3 halves times negative 4 is going to be negative 6. And then I'm going to add 3 to both sides to get y by itself. Y equals 3 halves x minus 3. This is the equation of my line that is perpendicular to that original line. All right, moving on. Determine if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So for 5, 6, 7, 8, we're just going to basically examine the slopes and determine, is it parallel, is it perpendicular, or is it neither? All right, so in number 5, I'm given two equations. Y equals 2x plus 4 and 4x minus 2y equals 7. So if I look at that first equation, it's already in y equals mx plus b form. So that means I already know my slope. It's in slope-intercept form. My slope here is positive 2. Okay, well, I need to get the y by itself over here because I don't know the slope yet. This is not in slope-intercept form. This is in standard form. I need to get y by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 4x on both sides. Negative 2y equals 7 minus 4x. To get y by itself, I'm going to divide every single term by negative 2. So y equals negative 7 over 2. Negative 4 divided by negative 2 is positive 2x. All right. So now that my y is by itself, I can now know my slope. My slope for this is going to be positive 2. Remember, slope is attached to x. So now looking at both of these slopes, what do you notice? They're exactly the same. They're the same number, which means that they are parallel. Parallel slopes are the same slope. Moving on to number 6. In both of these equations, y is not by itself. So I'm going to have to solve for y in both of these and get y by itself. The first thing I'm going to do on this equation is subtract 5x on both sides. And then I want to divide everything by 3 to get y by itself. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Negative 5 divided by 3 is negative 5/3 x. So what is my slope here? My slope is negative 5 over 3. Because when I'm looking to see if something is parallel, perpendicular, or neither, I don't really care what the equation is. I care what the slope is. That's what I want. All right, over here I'm going to subtract 3x on both sides to get the y by itself. Negative 5y equals 20 minus 3x. Divide everything by negative 5. Y equals 20 divided by negative 5 is negative 4. Negative 3 divided by negative 5 is positive 3 over 5x. My slope here is positive 3 over 5. What do we notice about these two slopes? Well, they're opposite reciprocals. One's negative, the other one's positive, and one's 5 over 3 and the other one's 3 over 5. So they're opposite signs and they're flipped fractions. Opposite reciprocals means I have perpendicular lines. All right, moving on. So I'll plug my pen in really quick so that it can charge a little bit. So in number 7, I have y equals 3x minus 4 and y equals 4 minus 3x. So do I know the slope just by looking at these? Yes. How do I know that? Y is by itself. It's in y equals mx plus b form. So because y is by itself, I already know what my slopes are. In the first equation, my slope is positive 3, right? 3x, 3. Over here, my slope is always attached to x. This one's negative 3 because that's what's in front of the x, negative 3x. So I have a slope of 3 and I have a slope of negative 3. Are these slopes exactly the same? No. So they're not parallel. Are they opposite reciprocals? No. If I want opposite reciprocals, it needs to be the opposite sign and I have to flip the fraction. So if I wanted this to have a perpendicular slope, this would need to be negative 1 over 3. And this one would to be positive 1 over 3. And I don't have either of that. So are these perpendicular to each other? No. These are neither. Okay? So again, they're not exactly the same, so they're not parallel. But they're not opposite reciprocals, so they're not perpendicular. They are opposite, but they're not reciprocals. Okay, number 8. Now, number 8 is the one that confuses people sometimes because they're like, what do I do with this? Well, we have y equals 6 and x equals 2. Now, these are letters that are all by themselves. There's no other letters in the equations. Y equals 6, y is the only letter there. That means that it's either a horizontal line or a vertical line. Same thing with x equals 2. There's only one letter. That means it's either a vertical, straight up and down line or a side-to-side horizontal line. So in order to figure that out, let's draw a graph. Draw a picture. Okay, so I'm going to graph y equals 6 in red, okay? Now, if I look at y equals 6, that's going to be on my y-axis because it's y equals. On my y-axis, I'm going to plot a point at positive 6. Okay? If it was like y equals 3, then I would put a point on the y-axis at 3. Now, do you see how my black tick mark goes side to side like this? Then you're going to draw a horizontal side-to-side line there. Now, if I have a horizontal line, what kind of slope is this? This is a slope of 0. So my slope on this line is 0. Okay, next I need to graph x equals 2. Which axis am I going to look at to graph this? The x-axis. And I'm going to plot at positive 2. So you see how the tick mark goes up and down here. So you're going to create a vertical up and down line. What kind of slope is this? It makes a U. It's an undefined slope. M equals undefined. Well, undefined and a slope of 0 are opposite reciprocals of each other. These lines are perpendicular. Okay? So vertical and horizontal lines are always perpendicular. If I have two horizontal lines that look like this, that's parallel. If I have two vertical lines that look like this, that's parallel. But if I have one vertical and one horizontal, they're always going to be perpendicular to each other. All right. And the reason why that is because when I have 0, I can have 0 divided by a number, and that's going to equal 0, right? But if I have number divided by 0, that gives me error in the calculator, which means I have an undefined slope. So that's what I have here. 0 and number and 0 are opposite reciprocals of each other. It doesn't matter if the number is negative or positive or anything like that. So that's why it's perpendicular. Okay. So on this next page, you're only asked to basically create perpendicular and parallel lines based on the criteria given. So this page is the one that gives us the most amount of trouble when we take this test. So it is very important that you do pay attention for these problems. All right, we want to create an equation for each line with the following requirements. Number 9, we want it parallel to y equals 2x plus 1 and containing the point 7, 2. We want it parallel to this line, and we want it to go through 7, 2. In order to create a parallel line, I need the same slope. So if I look at this equation, do I know the slope? Yes, it's in y equals mx plus b. If it is in slope-intercept form, I know the slope. The slope here is positive 2. Do I want to use the same slope? Yes, because I want a parallel line. If I'm creating a parallel line, I want the same slope. So that's my slope. What's the point I'm going to use? The point I'm going to use is 7, 2. So I'm going to start in point-slope form. Y minus 2 equals 2x minus 7. So we want to start in point-slope form because I have a point and a slope. Now I want to get this to slope-intercept form. So we're going to distribute. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 7 is negative 14. And I want y by itself, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And then I get y equals 2x minus 12. This is the equation of a parallel line parallel to this one. Okay, number 10, perpendicular to y equals 5 minus 3x and containing the point 6, negative 1. All right, so here I want a perpendicular line. Perpendicular, which means I do not want the same slope because I want an opposite reciprocal slope. So here, what is my slope? Do I know my slope? I do know my slope because y is by itself and it's in slope-intercept form. So my slope here is going to be negative 3. If you say 5, that's the y-intercept. Be very careful. Remember, slope is always connected to x. Is this the slope I want to use? No, because I want a perpendicular line. So we need to do opposite reciprocal. So we're going to have our new slope. So the opposite would be positive, right? It would be positive 1 over 3. Because it's negative, we want it to be positive. And then we're going to flip 3, and we're going to flip the fraction, and it's going to be 1 over 3. So I don't care about my old slope anymore. I only care about my new slope. And then I'm going to use the point 6, negative 1. Okay, so now we're going to do point slope form. Y plus 1 equals 1/3 x minus 6. So we're going to distribute 1/3 x, and then 1/3 times negative 6 is negative 2, and then we're going to subtract 1 on both sides. We get y equals 1/3 x minus 3. All right. The hardest part about this is to remember, do you need a parallel slope or a perpendicular slope? That is the most common mistake that I see. All right, moving on to number 11. parallel to 2x plus 3y equals 7 and containing the point -3, -4. We want a line that is parallel this time. If I want a parallel line, I want the same slope. Do I know the slope of this equation? If you're saying 2, you're incorrect because y is not by itself. This is in standard form. This does not give me a slope. I need to get y by itself to see the slope. So, first thing I do is I'm going to subtract 2x on both sides. And then to get y completely by itself, divide everything by 3. 7/3. -2 divided by 3 is -2/3 x. Okay, now if you box this as your answer, what's the only thing you've really done here? All you've really done is convert that equation into slope-intercept form. You haven't even created a new line that is parallel. You just converted something. Congratulations, right? Like, you didn't do much. So make sure that you don't actually do that when you get to a test, because sometimes you're thinking so much, you're like, okay, I did work, I'm done. So make sure you're paying attention and being like, I didn't do anything, all I did was convert. All right, so what is the slope of this equation? The slope here is -2/3. Is this the slope that I want to use? Yes. I want a parallel line, so I want to use the same slope. So this is the slope I do want to use. And then I want to use the point -3, -4, because that's the point they asked me to use. So I'm going to use the same slope because it's parallel and use the point. So again, it's super important that you're reading and you're going through and making sure that you're doing what the problem asks of you, because sometimes we don't read and we mess up a little. Okay, so I plugged in my point, plugged in my slope, and now I'm going to get y by itself. So the first thing I need to do is distribute. -2/3 x here. -2/3 times +3 is going to be -2. And then I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides. Get y equals -2/3 x minus 6. So this is the equation of a line parallel to 2x plus 3y equals 7. All right, moving on to number 12. We want it perpendicular to 4x minus 5y equals 2 and containing the point 8, 0. I want perpendicular this time, so that means not the same slope. Do I know the slope of this equation? No. Again, you want it to be in y equals mx plus b form, and it's not. Get y by itself so that you can see the slope. So you're going to subtract 4x first. Okay. They're going to divide everything by -5. Y equals -2/5 plus, right, -4 divided by -5 is +4/5 x. Okay, my slope is going to be 4/5. Okay, that is my slope. Is this the slope I want to use? And again, don't stop here, right? We don't want to stop there because all we've done is convert. Now we're looking at our slope. This is the slope that I have based off of this equation. Do I want to use this slope in my new equation? No. Why not? You want it to be perpendicular. You need an opposite reciprocal slope. So that means my new slope is going to be -5/4. I do not want to use that old one. If I use the old one, I am creating a parallel line. You want to create your new line. So this is the new slope I'm going to use. And then the point is 8, 0. So we're going to do point slope form. Y minus 0 equals -5/4 x minus 8. Okay, well, y minus 0 is just y, right? So it's just, you just write y. -5/4 x times, or -5/4 times x is -5/4 x. -5/4 times -8 is +10. And y is already by itself, so we are good. We're done here. I've created a perpendicular line. All right, number 13 is parallel to the x-axis and containing the point 6, -2. Now this one doesn't even mention an equation. It's talking about the x-axis. If I see x-axis mentioned or y-axis mentioned, your safe bet is to always draw a picture. Always draw a graph so that you can visualize that a little bit better. Don't try to graph it, or don't try to actually create an equation, right? So if you look at the last few, they gave me an equation. So I had to use that equation to figure out what I needed to do. So I would not graph these, I would just basically use my slope. But on these next 4, where it talks about a line or an axis, what I want to do for those is draw a picture to help me visualize. Same thing with this one right here. Do you see how there's not an x and y in each equation? This one only has one y, and this one only has one x, so you want to graph those. But you don't want to graph these two because there's x and y in both. So if there's an x and a y there, do not graph. If there's only an x or only an y, then you graph those. Okay, so parallel to the x-axis. So let's go ahead and plot and create a graph here. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? All right, we want it parallel to which axis? Parallel to the x-axis. So I'm going to highlight the x-axis here. So when I create my new line, I do not want it to cross that x-axis. Now I want it to contain the point 6, -2. So let's plot that. So 6, -2 is going to be right here. Okay, 6, -2. All right, parallel. Do I want it to cross that yellow line or not? No. Parallel lines never intersect, right? So when I create a line that's parallel to it, it's going to go side to side. Okay? Where does the green line cross? Which axis? The x-axis or the y-axis? It crosses the y-axis, so it's going to be y equals. Where does it cross the y-axis? At -2. Okay? Parallel to the x-axis, so you do not want it to cross. If you create a line that goes like this, you have created a perpendicular line because you want a line that does not cross. All right, 14, perpendicular to the line y equals 4 and containing the point 3, 7. Now this one says perpendicular to y equals 4. So if there's only one letter showing, then you want to graph it. Right? If it says like y equals 4 or x equals 4, you want to graph that. It's easy to visualize. And you don't have to draw all these tick marks, but I am, because that's just how I am, right? I'm going to get rid of that last problem so I have some more room. Okay. So we want it perpendicular to y equals 4. So let's graph y equals 4. Y equals 4 is going to be on the y-axis, okay? And then you're going to make a point at +4. Okay, y equals 4 is on the y-axis. And then do you see how that tick mark goes side to side? You're going to draw a line that goes side to side on it. Y equals 4. It's a horizontal line. Okay, then you want to plot the point 3, 7. That's like somewhere up here. So let's get rid of this last problem here. Okay. 3, 7. Whoops, I got rid of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's about right here. Okay. I want to create a perpendicular line to it. So when I am creating a perpendicular line, do I want the line to go through the blue line or not? I do. Perpendicular lines cross at 90 degrees. But if I wanted a parallel line, then I would go this way, side to side, because I don't want it to cross. Whoops. All right. So where does your green line cross? It crosses the x-axis, so it's going to be x equals, and it crosses at the number 3. Okay? Again, these can be really tricky because they're super simple, but really easy to forget at the same time. Okay? Next one. 15. We want it parallel to the y-axis. Parallel to the y-axis and containing the point -1, 7. Okay, it says parallel to the y-axis. It mentions an axis. There's y by itself. So let's go ahead and graph this. Okay. So I want it parallel to the y-axis, so I'm going to highlight the y-axis real quick. I'm highlighting that. Oh, I guess I can't make it. I was going to make it a little smaller, but it's okay. I want it parallel to that axis. So when I create a line, I do not want it to cross that y-axis. And then I want it to contain the point -1,7. So let me plot that. We're going to have to make my highlighter a lot smaller. There we go. Okay. We want it parallel to that red line. So do I want my green line to go up and down or left to right? I want it up and down because I want it parallel. I never want it to cross that red line. So this green line is a vertical line. It goes through the x-axis, so it will be x equals, and it goes through the number -1. So x equals -1 is my equation. Okay, last one in this video. Perpendicular to the line x equals 3 containing the point 5,8. I see a number and a letter all by itself, right? There's no x and y together. That tells me to graph. I would not graph on these 4 because there's an x and a y in each equation. But in this equation, there's only an x, so I'm going to graph. And then on this one, I'm going to cheat a little bit and just graph the point that I need to graph and nothing else. So I'm just going to draw those tick marks. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plot the line x equals 3. X equals 3 is going to be on my x-axis at the number +3. That line is going to be a vertical line because it goes through the x-axis and those tick marks go up and down. And then I'm going to plot the point 5,8. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's like right here. Get rid of that last graph so I have some more room to see this. Okay. So 5,8 is that orange dot right there. I want it to be perpendicular to that purple line. Okay, perpendicular, so I want it to cross. I don't want it to be parallel. So I'm going to have it to go and be side to side, a horizontal line. Perpendicular. So again, perpendicular lines cross at 90 degrees. Parallel lines never intersect, so they're always going to have the same slope. If I were to draw an up and down line, that's going to make it parallel to that x equals 3, and we want it to be perpendicular to x equals 3. So now I have to write the equation. Graphing it is not enough. If you've graphed it, great, but you haven't really written an equation, so I can't give you any credit. So this orange line crosses the y-axis, so it's going to be y equals at +8. All right, so that is it for the first video going over problems 1 through 16.